Hey, welcome to your nervous system video. So the goals of this video, we are discussing how do animals carry out the 5 characteristics of life. The objectives for this video, after this you should be able to say, I know the function of the nervous system and I know the structures in the nervous system and their functions. So you guys learned about how cells are organized into tissues, tissues into organs, and then organs into systems. Systems are a bunch of organs working together for some particular function, and the function of the nervous system is to gather and interpret information from inside the body and outside the body, and then to respond to that information as needed. So this controls every single thing you do. It takes in information, it processes it, and then it makes decisions and responds to that information. So there are 2 main parts in the nervous system. There is the central nervous system, which you can see here, colored orange, and then the peripheral nervous system, which you can see here in purple. They work together. The CNS, the central nervous system, is kind of like the control center. It processes and responds to all of the information. The peripheral nervous system connects the central nervous system to all of the parts of the body. So it can take information in from any part of the body, send it through the spinal cord to the brain and the central nervous system, and then it will take the information from the central nervous system and send it back out to all parts of the body. In the peripheral nervous system, one of the very important structures is called a neuron, and a neuron is essentially a nerve cell. It's a very specialized cell that is in charge of sending and receiving information. And the information that is sent through your body is sent in something called impulses. And impulses are electrical messages. So a neuron, even though it's very specialized, still has a lot of similarities to other eukaryotic cells that we've learned about. It has a cell body, which you can see labeled, and inside the cell body is the nucleus of the cell and other organelles. But then there are a lot of specialized parts to the neuron. You can see that there are little branches coming off of the cell body called dendrites. The dendrites on a neuron receive impulses. They take in those electrical messages. A neuron can have thousands of dendrites, which means they're taking information in from maybe thousands of other cells. And then you can see there's the axon, and the axon carries impulses away from the cell body to other neurons and other cells, like muscle cells. Covering the axon part of the neuron is the myelin sheath. It's an insulator. It means that the electrical impulse is only going to travel along the axon and not go places where it's not supposed to go. Just like wires are insulated, your neurons have insulation. And at the very tip of the axon part of the neuron, you can see that it branches out. It can branch out so it can send information to many different cells. The very end, where it connects to another cell, maybe another neuron, maybe a muscle cell, is called an axon terminal. Here we just have another picture of a neuron under a microscope, and you can see the cell body that has lots of dendrites poking out, and then we have the long axon, which would be sending impulses away. So remember, in the neuron, the dendrites are receiving information, and then they're sent along on the axon. While neurons are already very specialized, there are 2 different kinds of neurons. There are sensory neurons and motor neurons. Sensory neurons take in information and send it to the brain, and motor neurons take information from the brain and send it other places in the body. So we have a picture of fire here. A sensory neuron would be a neuron that would feel that the fire is very hot and send that information to the brain. The brain would make some decisions and then send its information through the motor neurons to your hand to pull your hand away so you don't get burned anymore. These neurons are not just connected one by one, they're bundled together into something called a nerve. So a nerve is a bundle of neurons, both sensory neurons and motor neurons, together with connective tissue, and they travel throughout the body from the spinal cord to all of the parts of the body. So again, in the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, there are 2 different systems even within that. There is the somatic nervous system, and this nervous system is in charge of voluntary movement, so movements that you decide to make. So talking or smiling or dancing or taking a selfie, something that you decide to do. So and then you have the autonomic nervous system, which is full of nerves that don't need your conscious control. They are things you don't think about. It controls digestion and your heartbeat and anything that just happens automatically. All right, so the PNS takes in information from inside the body and the outside environment, and it sends it to the CNS. This is kind of the control center, the decision maker, and all this information goes to the CNS. So it receives, again, the CNS receives information from the PNS. It receives it through the sensory nerves, the sensory neurons, makes decisions, and then sends those decisions back to the rest of the body through the motor nerves in the peripheral nervous system. The brain is the largest part of the central nervous system. It's the main control center of the nervous system. It controls processes that happen involuntarily, things that are automatic like digestion, and it also controls things that you do on purpose like smiling or walking or jumping. It has three main parts, and each of the parts has its own job. It has the cerebrum, which is A and yellow, the cerebellum, which is C and green, and then the medulla oblongata, which is B and purple. All right, so the first part of the brain, you can see it in red in this rotating animation here of a human skull. It's the biggest part of the brain, the cerebrum. It's kind of mushroom and dome shaped, and it has two hemispheres. So you can see it has two halves, a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. And in general, the right hemisphere of the brain controls the left part of the body, and the left hemisphere controls the right part of the body. But most processes use both halves of the brain anyways. So the cerebrum is the part of the brain where you think. It contains all of your memories. Many of your senses are controlled in the cerebrum. So the senses of sight and taste and odor sensing, the feeling of pain, heat, and cold. And here is the cerebellum, kind of underneath the cerebrum. You can see it in red in the rotating skull. It's underneath and in the back of the brain. This part of your brain processes sensory information that comes from your body. The cerebellum is also in charge of keeping track of all of the parts of your body, and it helps keep you in balance. So if you're about to tip over and fall, it can help your body put itself in the right place so you don't fall and hurt yourself. And now the smallest part of the brain, you can see it highlighted in orange in the picture on the right and in red again in the rotating picture. This is the part of the brain that connects to the spinal cord. It's only about 3 centimeters long. So this controls involuntary actions in your body. So it helps control your body temperature, involuntary breathing, your heart rate, and your blood pressure. You can also see that it's pretty well protected by the rest of the brain and your skull. And so the brain is one part of your central nervous system, and it connects to the spinal cord. The spinal cord is the other part of your central nervous system. And the spinal cord is a bundle of nerves about as thick as your thumb, and it is very well protected by vertebra. The spinal cord passes impulses, so passes electric messages to the brain and then from the brain. It allows the brain to communicate with the peripheral nervous system. Sensory information goes into the spinal cord and up to the brain, and then the brain sends motor information out through the spinal cord and to the peripheral nervous system. So here's just another overview of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system in pink with the brain, our control center, makes all of the decisions and decides everything, and then sends that information through the spinal cord. The spinal cord is connected to the rest of the body through the peripheral nervous system in yellow. So it sends information through the peripheral nervous system to different parts of the body, and it also takes in information from the different parts of the body, sends them to the spinal cord and up to the brain for processing and decision making. So the goals of our video, we were discussing how do animals carry out the 5 characteristics of life, and now you should be able to say that you know the function of the nervous system and you know the structures in the nervous system and their functions.